There it goes. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the November 15th Special Cannabis Ordinance Task Force meeting. Call the meeting to order at 1:07 p.m. And Ruby, can you call roll call, please?
Absolutely. Catherine Vanderwall. Here. Nara Del Vaca. Present. Rebecca Harper. Here. Jennifer Smith. Here. The Fire District Representative. Not present. Paul is on Zoom.
Okay.
William Wise. Present. Richmond Kelly is not present. And Robert Geary, not present.
Thank you. Item number 3 is consideration of the November 4th minutes. We always rely to see if we can approve them. Oh, hi there, welcome.
Hi.
You're welcome to sit right here if you'd like.
And we are able to approve these ones.
Fantastic. We'll let you all review for a moment. For discussion. If you don't, we can also open up for public comment. If that's amendable to the task force. I'll open up public comment for item number 3, consideration of the minutes from November 4th. Please, if you'd like to speak, state your name for the record. And if you're on Zoom, raise your hand. And Ruby, I'll let you go ahead and call on people. And it looks like nobody in the room. Oh, okay.
With the cultivation retail sales.
This one is related to the last items that we spoke about in the draft minutes. And they are included on page 3 of the packet, the draft minutes. So right now the task force is reviewing them to see if they have any edits or modifications. And then we also open it up to the public. It looked like, Tom, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, Michelle, hi. Tom Lasik. I discussed this in the planning commission meeting yesterday about that one word.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, that was not discussed in the minutes. It wasn't discussed in the meeting last time. And we feel it's significant that word be retained and not struck through. And it was not discussed in the meetings last time.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the room on the draft minutes? Or Ruby, do we have anyone on Zoom?
Yes.
Like maybe Holly?
Yeah, so Sarah, go ahead and speak.
Good afternoon. This is Sarah Bodner, consultant. I wanted to clarify something in the minutes under item number 4, which was discussion and consideration on 73.4 restrictions and prohibited activities. And there are a number of activities that are listed as commercial cannabis cultivation is prohibited within 1,000 feet of the following areas or uses. And I wanted to raise the question for the task force if the intention, because I think this was not explicitly stated, is the intention that is the setback from the cultivation area, specifically where an operator will be growing cannabis plants. That was how it was written in the ordinance regarding public lands, I believe, and it has been discussed at other points. I think it's important to specify where that 1,000 foot setback begins, and if it is from the portion of your parcel where you are actually growing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
And then, Holly Harris.
Oh, hi, Holly Harris. I had something further that I wanted to say on section 4 in the draft minutes. Basically, I went back and took a look at the video, and Richmond made a motion to add Clear Lake to the list of public lands. Maria then rephrased it to 1,000 foot setback to apply to 7.79 full lake level of Clear Lake. And then Rebecca said motion to include Clear Lake at that stage as part of subsection C public lands. Based on that, I'm suggesting that it should read, additionally, all state and county parks are public lands. Clear Lake is also public lands measured from the 7.79 full lake level on the Rumsey gauge. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. We will, it's at the discretion of the task force, but what I would recommend is, since we've had a couple comments about the wording on that perhaps staff can go back and watch the video and clarify that language to what was discussed, unless task force wanted to handle it a different way.
I mean, we can amend the minutes before they're accepted and filed.
Yes, yeah, I staff personally doesn't have the exact language on hand right now, so it would be, yeah, if you all would like to do that.
And have you guys clarify that.
Monday.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to accept and file the minutes and then for staff to go back and clarify the language. So we would have to table it, or the task force would have to make a motion to amend the language.
I mean, I guess staff force could amend the language as noted in the video or something to that effect. Whatever the staff force says.
Then we're approving something that we're not 100% sure on. I would make a motion that we just table the minutes. And then have you guys go back through and listen to that? Because I do recall there was a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah.
Including Rosie. Right.
So I'd like to make a motion that we table these minutes till the next meeting on, so we can have specific language.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to table the minutes. Let me get a vote. All in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes. And one thing I'd just like to note about the next meeting on Mondays, we had to post the agenda packet today by 1 now, just because of the back-to-back meetings. So you'll see the agenda just the same as this, and then we'll do some sort of update by then, Monday morning. But as far as getting the language, we'll try to get to that before that meeting, but you won't see it like in the written agenda, just because of the timing. But we can always green sheet it or bring it, of course, as an example at that meeting. All right, so moving along to item number 4, continuing our discussion on restrictions and prohibited activities. And as I recall, we left off on the farmland discussion and wanting tribal input and potentially also fire district input, I believe. I did reach out to Robert Geary and reminded him of this meeting and invited him, but it looks like he wasn't able to attend. So we weren't able to get that direct input for today's meeting. But we can go ahead and continue the discussion. So we were looking at the language that was added in this text here, and then how that applies with the setback and the exclusion area. On page 21, if the agenda comes in. It's hard to dig through sometimes. Also wanted to note, It will be addressed later at the end in the public comment section, but we did also get a public comment that was submitted by Peter Luchetti and on behalf of Lake County Community Action Project or CAP Planning Coalition. Looks like some of them are here in attendance today, but it was green sheeted. So just wanted to point that out because it is in relation to farmland protection as well.
So I think we had left off at our last meeting on this topic. Catherine and I had both mentioned some inconsistencies between the FPZ boundaries and the historic farmland map boundaries. And so I just wanted to see if maybe we wanted to pick back up there.
They remain two separate parts.
The two maps. I don't, do you recall that? I wasn't, so I apologize. I
So
wasn't.
with that, there are two separate maps. One is the FMMP map, which identifies all of the local farmland in the area. The other is the commercial cannabis exclusion zone that has a layer for farmland protection zone. And that is correct. The board did create that layer to encompass ordinance 3101 and 3103 for farmland of local importance, statewide importance, and of unique importance. With that, it was determined by the board which areas those would be in. There are some bodies of farmland of importance that are not included within the cannabis, commercial cannabis exclusion zone layer as adopted by the Board of Supervisors. So if that would provide you guys some context, maybe to open it to discussion.
It would make sense to me for the boundaries of FPZ to be consistent with the pre-existing important farmland map.
And are there specific, can we view the specific descriptions of each of those types of farmland?
Yes.
Yes. Is that included?
Yeah, these are all designated at the state level, but that's a helpful point, I think, defining those a bit further.
Because I feel like, and I may be wrong, I feel like the FPZ zone when it was created completely separate to those state definitions.
Hmm.
It might be more of like local and subjective. So I think we need clear delineation.
Okay. Did any other task force member have any discussion to add to that before we open it for public comment? Or did you want to hear public comment first? Okay, we'll open this item for public comment. Anybody in the room like to make a comment? Peter, go ahead and state your first and last name for the record.
Peter Reed. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's in the letter, and we submitted a letter, a couple of observations. We're forming the Community Action Project in Lake County with distribution of this letter. So this is a new organization that we've just put together of community members who've been actively involved in planning, commenting on policy, and so on. It's also an outgrowth of the paper that I wrote on cannabis, which we still haven't sat down and really discussed in detail. This may not be the place where that would happen, but I'd still like to suggest that that happen. As far as today's agenda is concerned, focusing on the item that's on the table, what we're proposing is an amendment to 3101, which is the Farmland Protection Ordinance, to include all areas designated as prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance, unique farmland, farmland of local importance, as depicted in the current Lake County important farmland map prepared by the State of California Department of Conservation Farmland Mapping and Monitoring Program. In addition to what's on the map, we'd also like to include a request that all certified organic farmland in Lake County be afforded similar protections to protected farmland under Ordinance 3101. So our request basically states that we'd like to eliminate the exclusion zone and just say all important farmland is treated equally and equitably with the same policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room like to speak at this time on this item? No. Ruby, what about, we'll go to the Zoom room.
Looks like we have one hand. Katie, go ahead and please speak or state your first and last name.
Hi, my name is Katie Evans. I'm a resident of Lower Lake, California, and I would echo what Peter Lucchetti just spoke about, as well as Rebecca Harper, in that the current zone needs to be expanded to include more of the farmland that's in Lake County that's been traditionally farmed and historically farmed.
Thank you. Great. There's a couple more.
Holly, go ahead and speak.
Oh, hi, Holly Harris. I also would like to echo that. It seemed a little bit hopscotch, the way that the farm protection zone was put in the cannabis exclusion. And I think it should just be straightforward across the board, per what Mr. Lucchetti stated before. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly.
And go ahead.
Hi there. This is Sarah Bodner, consultant. I'm just going to offer today's friendly reminder that cannabis is farming and cannabis is agriculture. We plant plants in the ground, just like hemp, and it is considered an agricultural product by the County of Lake currently, and hopefully it could be considered an agricultural crop someday to reflect the true nature of the plant. I just want to remind people that all agriculture is subject to peaks and valleys. Every crop that is grown in Lake County has gone through, highs and lows in terms of valuation and marketability. And we've seen certain agricultural industries decline over the years, and those the infrastructure for those and the facilities have now been converted to cannabis, because cannabis is one of the agricultural products that Lake County has access to. And I think it would be a grave mistake to look at banning farming cannabis anywhere in Lake County. As I've said before, I think the Farmland Protection Zone was kind of a relic of a time when we were on the eve of legalization and we didn't know how it was all going to turn out, and we didn't know what the risks were for planting cannabis adjacent to other crops. And now we see what farmers are looking to, and I don't mean just cannabis farmers, but all farmers, is the opportunity for crop diversification. There are many operators in the County of Lake that farm what we call traditional crops that were already legal, and have now looked to move into cannabis. And I think that the task force has an opportunity now to look at sunsetting the Farmland Protection Zone as kind of a effort made in a moment of time before there was more information, and instead look at what is the best and highest use of Lake County's farmland. I don't believe that is putting down cement pads on prime soils and forcing people to grow in greenhouses. I think that's a giant step in the wrong direction for the County of Lake. So I want to counter, the comments that are being made here and suggest that we actually rethink this whole model. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Looks like we have
Angela,
Trey, then Margot.
Thank you, Angela Emerald. I just wanted to voice my that I am in agreement with the comments made by Peter Lucchetti, Holly Harris, and Katie Evans. Granted, yes, it has been in the county for several years now, but at the same token, we're seeing a lot of opting out, fallowing. So I believe that until we're back up to all the permits being used, or at least 80% of the permits being used, we should keep these protections in place and then have the discussion about revising it if there is any revisions that want to be made. But for right now, I'm in agreement with the comments from everyone in keeping this in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Trey, you're up.
Thank you, Trey Sherrill. I just wanted to comment on if we expanded the farmland protection zones to include, I have several clients that they have vineyards and cannabis cultivation. The vineyards are generally considered unique farmland per the farmland mapping program. And then there's lands of local importance. There's a lot of existing cannabis farms on these farmland classifications per the mapping system. And I just don't support that. I don't see if we prevent cannabis farming, particularly outdoor cannabis farming in these farmlands of importance, it pushes cannabis farming into the hills where there are increased environmental impacts. And I don't think that is prudent. There's a lot of farmland in Lake County that is fallow at this time that used to support orchards and other agricultural crops. And I think that those would be good lands for cannabis farming to be conducted on. Thank you.
Thanks, Trey. Margot, did you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Michelle. Margot Kambara. I support the notion that we should protect our farmlands. And I believe that we should have consistent mapping and rules for protecting our farmlands. We are an ag community, and so we should protect part of our agricultural heritage and protect those lands, especially when they are trying to be organic. As far as taking land out of production with greenhouses to be compliant with keeping cannabis cultivation, contained within protected farmland areas. I looked at the definition for greenhouse. It does not say you have to have poured concrete flooring. It could be concrete blocks. It doesn't even have to be flooring. It doesn't even say that the dirt has to be covered. So again, trying to keep our agricultural crops that are affected adversely by cannabis contained, I think, is a prudent measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot.
Well, it's a big question.
Well, as long as you keep to a couple minutes, and what we don't want is a back and forth between folks in terms of public
I just have-
comment.
Also people who haven't spoken.
Well, please do that first.
Oh, okay, it's like,
So we have Donna.
right, oh, okay.
Donna Makowitz. I'm in support of the farmland protection zones, and I'm in agreement with Peter Lucchesi's paper and Holly, Katie, and Angela's remarks. And it was interesting at the Lake County Land Trust dinner when Sharon Zoller was there speaking on all of the great farm protection areas and crops that the word cannabis didn't come up at any time in her speech. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Did you have something, Richard?
Yeah.
Just state your name for the record, please.
Richard Durham,
Thank you.
cultivator. Yeah, so I've been in Lake County now since 1991. I remember driving through Lake County in 1991 and I'm making the decision whether I want to live here or not. And I remember driving for hours through pear orchards. Yeah, they're not there anymore. And came the grapes. Drove hours. There's a 10 square mile vineyard beyond me called Snow's Lake. If you've been by there lately, it's gone. Every last grape is from the hole. So to think that farmlands don't change, because they do, and they'll continue to change. So my ideas, thoughts are, if you become restrictive, you're just going to make false barriers. And cannabis is just another crop. In fact, the cannabis cleans up soil. It actually is, for the organic farmers, it takes out heavy metals from soils, takes out radiation from soils. So it's kind of short-sighted to think that farmlands of importance will always be growing the crops that were first established on them, because that's not how capitalism works. You know, you go with the crop that can make you money. So I just think it's short-sighted to think that trying to hold on to history in an artificial fashion is not capitalism. Period.
Thank you, Richard. Looks like we have somebody else in Zoom that hasn't spoken yet.
Yeah, there's two people. So this one's listed as KMAT.
Hey, Meg, can you speak for state name, please?
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Karen Mantelli, and I've been listening to the discussion. And I agree with Sarah's statements, and I approve that. I like that Richard agrees as well. I think that we need to look at the highest and best use, and the times do change. We need to work with ag uses, and cannabis is an ag use. The hoop houses right now that's do allow for containment. So those individuals and the neighbors that don't like the smell of the cannabis, then there are those afforded to the growers. But I do think that we don't need to exclude more farmland. And I think we do need to allow for the opportunities for crop diversification. As I said, the highest and best use at the time. And as Richard said, over time, the crops do change. So thank you.
One more. Nope. And so now we have Jordan P.
I agree with Sarah and Richard. I believe that, the notion to expand the exclusion zone doesn't really, make a lot of sense. If we expand the exclusion zones, it's just going to push farms further out into the undisturbed wilderness, and just, I just feel like it should stay where it's at. Appreciate it.
And Jordan, I'm so sorry. Can you state your first and last name?
Yeah, Jordan Poole.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else who hasn't spoken yet on this item?
Andrew hadn't spoke. Andrew, and I had his hand up. I had his hand up. Looks like we put it down.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, I'll allow it. It looks like Angela, and then I think his hand's still up.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. All right. Hey, Andrew, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Andrew Dobbs Kramer. I just wanted to echo some of the statements that Sarah Bodner, Richard Durham, Aaron and Jordan just made. And I also want to kind of take a step back and just before we get too far down the road of what we can do and what language we can add, I want to ask what problem are we looking to solve by restricting the property rights of these owners of agricultural land and banning cannabis in all farmlands? Is this really just a solution in search of a problem, or do we have any evidence here? Is preventing property owners from leasing to cultivators really ultimately a benefit to the county as a whole and going to raise our tax base, or is forcing them to keep their lands fallow because there are no grape growers that want to use them really the best for the county? I think, as Richard mentioned, crops evolve, crops change. Where I grew up started as cherries and then became apples, and now it's grapes, and moving on to hemp next. This is the way of farming, and I think we should all think about, would we rather see the next crop go in, or would we rather continue looking at old, dead, fallowed orchards? And also, just to clarify separately, a greenhouse is a structure that requires a building permit, which requires a foundation. So unfortunately, they can't just be put in with a dirt floor. Thanks.
Anybody else who has not spoken yet on this item?
I feel like the hands up used to float up to the top, and now
Yeah.
it needs to search through.
I think that looks like Angela has a hand up. Can't remember if you already.
Thank you, Michelle. No, I'll make it quick. I just have a question, and maybe some people from the industry can answer this. Since we're talking about protecting ag soils, and there was mention of that they are planted in the ground. Do we know how many are planted in the ground versus how many are planted in smart pots? How many are actually in the soil, or are they planted in smart pots with imported soil?
Thank you, Angela. I just asked Mary if she had any indication on that as percentage wise, and we do not.
No, that's something that we would have to look back through every project's property management plan in order to identify their cultivation styles for the 158 approved projects.
So I'll close public comment on this item. Oh, did we have more public comment? Just remember, we're not going to get into a back and forth, but I'll allow you two to speak. Go ahead.
In response to Director Turner's suggestion this not be a back and forth, I have a request, given many of the comments that have been made by the cannabis industry. I've written a detailed paper critiquing cannabis policy in Lake County, and what I'm asking for is that we meet here, the courthouse, and page turn the paper, hear from the cannabis industry, hear from those of us who are concerned about the current policy, and get into some of the details that have been described in the meeting today. One thing I would observe, I've listened to this meeting a number of times now, about this format of a meeting, it's intended to revise ordinances, which is fine, makes perfect sense. It is not an ideal environment to talk about complex policy matters. That requires a lot more time and thought and effort to really do a proper job of examining the strengths and weaknesses of the current cannabis policy, not necessarily the ordinances. So I'm making that request. I'm not participating in a back and forth here. I'm simply saying this could lead to that in the absence of proper policy dialogue. And we need proper policy dialogue. And I really want to insist on it. And I'm fully prepared to go to the Board of Supervisors and do that. I would like to do it with your cooperation and help, however. And I welcome the cannabis industry's participation in that dialogue. They should be at the table, and we should be critiquing and analyzing the ins and outs, the goods and bads, and ups and downs of 8 years worth of complex cannabis experience in Lake County. And I'll close on this point. In terms of me being transparent, I wrote a very detailed paper, put everything on the table, I'm hiding nothing. I really want this dialogue. But I know our group, the Cannabis, or the Community Action Project, wants this dialogue. We welcome that interaction with the cannabis industry. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Michelle. Just a clarification. In Lake County's Article 68, where definitions are included, greenhouse for cannabis is described. Specifications for the walls, thickness of the walls are described. Flooring is not described at all. There's no requirement for a concrete floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment on that item and bring it back to the task force. And the language that we're looking at currently is on bullet point B. Outdoor cultivation of cannabis shall not be allowed within 1,000 feet of any farmland protection zone. So just wanted to remind everyone where we're at. This has been really good input. We're happy to see both sides of the table here. Actually, it makes it really helpful discussion. Yep, go ahead.
Are we going to have task force discussion now?
Yes.
A couple things. Andrew Kramer stole the words out of my mouth. I think we really need to get back to the genesis of why we're talking about exclusion areas, especially as it relates to farmland and the different types of farmland. Like, what is it we're trying to achieve with this? Or is this just policy that was built out of fear of the unknown? So I think, point of this task force that's been sitting here for 2.5 years. So thank you for coming now for some dialogue. I greatly appreciate the dialogue, and hopefully that we can have more open dialogue and figure out, where are the commonalities and not waste time on the commonalities and find where we can meet in the middle. So I think if we get to what are we trying to solve here by protecting the farmland from one crop versus another, from one organic crop against crops that may or may not be organic. So let's figure out as a group, as a task force that's been sitting here for 2.5 years, what is the point of this? And how do we solve a perceived problem? And is there a problem? That would be my request to the task force.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add real quick is this item, this whole list was just brought forward by staff to discuss all of the exclusion zones. Staff anyway didn't identify a specific issue with this section of the code like we have done with some others, but of course, I know everybody has differing opinions on that, but to answer at least procedurally to your point about the question of this one.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're here to align and update and modernize a regulation that was written prior to state legalization. So I think that answering these questions is a part of what we've been asked to do by the board of supervisors.
Because we've got planners in the room, I'd like to find out whether Andrew is correct that a building permit requires a floor.
Sure. So this is something that I highlighted on my list to discuss with you guys. Greenhouses versus hoop houses and the differences between the two. A hoop house is a temporary structure. A hoop house is not, it is anchored to the ground. However, all of those materials are removed at the end of the cultivation season. A greenhouse is a permanent structure that requires a building permit through that. It does require to have engineered building plans and adhere to the California Building Code, which does include a foundation for the permanent structure.
Can you clarify that? The foundation and the slab are two different things.
So with that, foundation and slab are two different things, and it's under the interpretation of the chief building official to make that ultimate determination. Where we've seen manufactured homes go in on point installation, we have also seen homes go in on a concrete slab installation. So it really depends on what's being brought forward within the building permit materials under the review by the Building Safety Division in adherence to the California Building Code.
So my only part of that.
I apologize, Richard. It's not public comment.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I apologize. It's
To dovetail off of Andrew's comment though, there was at one point, and so maybe we need to go back and find it, that if you were going to build a greenhouse, there were certain parcels that are in one of the protected zones, and we've got like 10 different zones. There, it did require a slab foundation for a greenhouse. And it was one of the protected ag zones. I don't know if that's been changed or if that's still there, but I think that we need to verify that.
I'd also be curious to know how many existing permits there are within the FMMP map zone.
Okay, within FMMP or FP?
Well, it's just been mentioned several times that if the boundaries of the FPZ map were enlarged, that cannabis cultivation will be pushed into the hills. So I'm interested to know how many permitted grows are operating within the FMMP boundaries currently.
So with the FMMP, we also have grazing land and other land. Are we specifically
the entire boundaries of that map, of the important farmland map?
All important farmland map.
Everything that's on the dang map.
All the definitions.
Yeah, I mean, so one option could be that the task force suggests looking into that definition and expanding it, or
well, you can't expand the state's definition, and you can't expand there.
No, right, because this says any farmland protection zone. So what does that mean exactly?
Except for that the board approves a map that is attached to this.
So right. That's yes.
Yeah.
So the task force, the recommendation could always be for them to take another look at that and include, a number of things that everyone is mentioning or not. But yeah, that with recommendations, that's, how it can go. We don't always have to figure out the exact answer, but if we can give some direction. But again, that's up to the task force. Staff is just here to guide and help the task force through this. It's ultimately whatever you all decide and think and want.
So going back to the FMMP data for Lake County, it shows a significant amount of layers: prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance, unique farmland, farmland of local importance, grazing land, urban and build-up land, other land, and water. And that is all encompassing of the whole county. So to answer the question, it would be all of the county is considered according to this document.
there is a specific map. It is called the Historic Important Farmland Map. I would like to know how many permanent cannabis operations are within the boundaries of that map, which I am certain does not encompass the whole county.
So do you
Does that
want to
bring
table this
clarity?
item?
I do not want to table it.
Well, we can't just pull that up right now.
The map
on
is a
fly.
layer on GIS.
Right, I understand, but the permitted number of projects.
Technically, there shouldn't be any.
Pull up.
Technically, there shouldn't be any because that's been in place from day one.
Yeah,
There's
farmland
5?
protection zone, and there's 5 outdoor projects that weren't able to convert that are going to expire.
But that's from the F, and we're talking FMMP.
Not FMNP.
And so that's the problem, or there's so many different terms and that we're using interchangeably.
Yeah.
Rebecca wants to know about FMMP, and now we're conflating it with FPZ.
Right.
And it's not only just those that would be, because there shouldn't technically be any within 1,000 feet of the FMMP, because that's been in since day one. FPZ. FPZ was later.
Includes grazing land.
Okay.
And other land.
Historic farmland.
The historic farmland.
Yes, so that has been in from day one. So there technically shouldn't be any within that existing. The FPZ came in 2022-ish.
Yeah.
And so that was added later. So they're definitely, we know of the 5 that are in that zone. Part of, I guess, why I bring this up is because there shouldn't be any, but also is like, can we open that up?
Yeah.
I mean,
you can certainly suggest that or discuss it.
I think, I don't know that we're going to be able to settle all of this here.
Right.
And I don't know how much time we spend on trying to figure that out, but maybe come up with suggestions or questions. And this is something that we do discuss on both sides of the aisle, so to speak, and figure out like what are reasonable recommendations or that we want to see the board direction on.
Or look into.
Yeah, because I don't think, because it's a lot. There's so many different terms of important farmland.
This is Bill Lace. I don't know that it's as complicated as it's sounding. Right?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, no, but I think like this idea that we would need to table it, like why? We're here to talk about this. And there's very clearly a public input that indicates that there is investment in how we decide on this. So I do not think that tabling this discussion is appropriate. I think there are substantive matters to be resolved here, and the public is asking us to do that. They will certainly be asking the Board of Supervisors to do that after we're done, if those matters are not resolved here. So the public will have its view heard regardless. This is one venue for that to happen.
Yeah, task force I know you guys know this, but task force makes the recommendations. We present that to planning commission and the board, and then of course go through the whole process of those detailed policy discussions and however long that takes through them and what the direct. Go ahead, Nora.
Ray, when he commented, talked about a couple of projects that I think he was working on that are in a zone where I know of at least a couple of, I know one went through last year, at least through planning, where a grape grower was looking to tear out a couple of acres in there and plant that with cannabis. I believe 4 Family is also in the process of doing that. So it's important to look at pipeline projects that could be affected, or, and I don't know whether there may be, as grapes are falling in price and people are not selling grapes, if more of our grape growers may want to diversify and have the opportunity. And I don't want to cut off our agricultural community from the ability to make money when it's a difficult enough calling as it is to say, well, here's the highest per pound product you could actually grow on here, but no, you can't because we decided that this plant isn't allowed in this agricultural zone. When the standards for growing cannabis are far more stringent than any other agricultural product in this state. Again, as Jen said in our last meeting, we're talking parts per billion, not parts per million. And in terms of lake and stream bed alteration permits, in terms of requirements, in terms of what products are allowed to be used, it's incredibly clean. And I, coming here, I'm driving through these orchards that, as Richard mentioned, are full of dead trees and not being used. And this is a county that's not particularly economically prosperous. And I don't want us to cut our citizens off at their knees through prohibitionist mindset.
So we have the provision B and then C. So B, as I already read, says, it shall not be allowed within 1,000 feet of the FPZ. And then C goes on to talk about if cultivation of cannabis is less than 1 mile from the FPZ, vegetation screen shall be required. And there are some other requirements here for vegetation screening. I don't know if that is something that the task force would like to discuss, or if you...
I was under the impression that we're discussing this portion of the ordinance in its entirety.
Which portion?
This whole Lake County Important Farmland section.
Yep. Yes. Yep. I was just trying to provide some guidance, but if you guys want to go in a different direction, that's perfectly.
I don't even know that we've made a decision on item A.
Yeah, I would.
I think that seems to be a little bit of an impasse, but.
And I did want to hear from Robert Gary on the sidelines that we discussed too. So,
can you provide clarification on how our participants via Zoom, are they still there? Paul isn't allowed to vote today, or he is allowed to vote today. How does that work?
They aren't on Zoom. Okay. Unfortunately, yeah. It's not.
But he can provide input.
Yes, absolutely.
As a member of the public or as a member of the task force?
That's a good question. I think in the past we've done it as a member of the task force, just can't vote, as I understand, and doesn't count for the quorum, for example.
Of the applications that have come in for greenhouse, regardless of whether they're in FPZ or wherever they are for mixed light cultivation, have any of them not opted for a slab? Have any of them opted for?
So all of the projects that we're taking in now currently haven't gotten that far to the building permit process, and they leave it open within their property management plan in hopes that they wouldn't have to put a permanent foundation into the farmland protection zone.
Okay. And then what about ones outside of just generally, there are greenhouse grows, when you're inspecting them, are you?
So generally the greenhouse locations outside of the farmland protection zones have not been built. That's typically like a stage 2 of development, and these people are only operating outdoor.
I think as we continue to discuss this in more detail, I think that it's really important that the task force members and staff are on the same page about these maps and which map is which. So I'd like to kind of get us all on the same page before we proceed.
Sure.
Really, because that's a little bit concerning to me that we aren't all aware of which map is which and how that all works.
So I'm attempting to connect to the California Department of Conservation. Their website is crashing. So I don't have access to that. What I do have access to is the County of Lake GIS portal and the FMMP map that is set from 2016.
We put that up on the, is there a way to share that screen?
You can join the Zoom. Yeah, and then we can also pull up the farmland protection zone map that the board of supervisors would have for 3101.
To me, the historic important farmland map, that was crafted with in specific data and information in mind, and the boundaries of the current FPZ map were not. So we've talked a lot about through the life of the task force, kind of aligning policy with the state, and I think this is one area where we could certainly do that by aligning the map with the already existing historic important farmland.
Ruby, I'm sending you an email that has the 2 links to open.
Hey, Ruby, we can just join the Zoom from over here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, if the California Conservation website isn't working for you, it's also available on the regular ca.gov and on Harvard University. 2 other locations where the map is.
Right, you join Zoom.
So, Article 27, page 120, talking about, and this is one of the first I thought we want to look at. Prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance, unique farmland, and farmland of local importance. There's some, I think if we're going to move in this direction, there's a lot of like, the permitting authority may allow outdoor cultivation outside a greenhouse if the prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance, unique farmland, and farmland of local importance are isolated areas that are not connected to a large system of such lands. So do we have a map of that? Like, what are these large systems of such lands? Is that on the map as well?
So with that, if you look to the map on the right, you can see that this would be connected to a larger body. The pale area here is connected to a larger body. However, this one isn't necessarily. But with that, there was an ordinance passed after 3101, which was ordinance 3103. And 3103 did make some amendments to that. And I think that that's the most current version that we should be looking at. And with that, it states Lake County farmland, farming agriculture is Lake County is important to our economy. Cannabis may present certain conflicts with more traditional farming. In order to ensure the protection of all agricultural industries within the county, the following rules will apply when the cannabis cultivation interfaces with farmland protection zones. So that's where the 2 things do come in together, is within this ordinance. And that's what staff's interpretation has been based on this ordinance, with the map that we're seeing to the left and then the actual FMMP data for Lake County from 2016 that you see to the right. So here, these are the exclusion zones that have been put into place, these pink areas here. And this is where indoor or greenhouse cultivation is allowed, outdoor is not. And then with that again, just to reiterate what I had mentioned to Rebecca, is according to the GIS portal for FMMP data for Lake County, it does show all of these specific areas encompassed within the whole county of Lake. So with that, it would just be a matter of looking at the other maps at the state level and then doing our comparing and contrasting.
So again, weird that you could cultivate indoor or in a greenhouse on protected farmland, which requires disturbance. And if it's indoor, you're building a building and foundations, and it just seems counterintuitive for a carbon sequestering plant to be required to be put into a building on prime farmland.
And the amount of energy it takes to grow indoors.
I mean, it just seems counterintuitive to me. And I think that, you know, that's why I think that this group needs to discuss and, you know, with all, like, maybe it needs to be a discussion, appointment meeting or whatever, where, what are we trying to accomplish with this? Are we trying to, are we addressing fear mongering about terpene taint and overspray of chemicals? Or protection of soil, because we're certainly not protecting the soil if we're putting a non-permeable foundation on prime soil. So I just think that a lot of discussions, yeah. Like, where are we trying to go with this?
It looks like Mireya has her hand up.
Yeah, from what I remember, from what I remember in the previous meetings, Rebecca was stating that one of the concerns with the conventional farmers was that they would be subject to lawsuits because the chemicals that are allowed in conventional farming could harm cannabis. So it seems like it's not really should it be in the dirt or not, or should it be in a building or not? It's how can we protect that conflict from happening? Perhaps if we looked at that, it would take care of the concerns of the surrounding farmers.
Is it the question? Is it the government's job to regulate civil complaints?
Apparently, the position was persuasive to the board, or we would not have had this ordinance in the first place.
Okay.
So it's just kind of what we have to deal with now. If we had other ways to think about it, like vegetative screening or other things that could protect, then I think it would assuage the concern that was the foundation for that ordinance, which I think it remains an ongoing concern.
Then I mean, maybe that's the starting point of a greater conversation for this part of the ordinance then.
Right.
Would hoop houses be a better option in terms of protecting the cannabis plants from drift from other agriculture? That would then not disturb the soil in a way. They'd be temporary. They wouldn't mess with root lines. It's open space for the time of the year that the plants aren't there, and it's far less expensive than requiring somebody to put in a permanent structure. Or the vegetative screening, as Director Turner mentioned. There's also a type of first line, I think it's should be farming and agriculture in Lake County is important.
Oh, yes.
Thank
you.
I think Nara's comment about hoop houses versus greenhouses is an interesting avenue for discussion. And we haven't necessarily heard too much from the public regarding that. So if it's amenable to staff, I'd be interested in opening up public comment to hear specifically how the public feels about that.
Okay, and I can comment on that as well from farms that were required to transition from outdoor to mixed light within the FPZ. A lot of them did ask if that was an option, but according to the ordinance as written, it was not. So with that being said, opening it to public comment, I think would be a great idea.
Well, and I think one thing that hopefully almost all of us can agree on is that paving over prime farmland is not protecting it, right? So if we can agree on that as a starting point, this might facilitate some better discussion.
Sure. So at this time, we're going to open public comment specific to the potential of allowing hoop houses instead of greenhouses, or potentially in addition to in the FPZ zone. Anybody in the room like to speak? Richard and then Peter.
So the future of cannabis will be the terroirs, the soils you're planting in. And if you're planting in smart pots or raised beds, you won't be able to have that as a designation for your farm. So if you had a greenhouse that just had a footing, not a slab, you could still go into the ground and still fit under that designation. So for example, I'm in the Red Hills Appalachian. If I wanted to put up a greenhouse, it behooved me to eliminate the slab cost, go into the ground, and when the designations came out, I would be able to, it would increase the value of my crop, is what I'm trying to say. And as far as drift, you have to have fresh air inside your hoop houses or your greenhouses. So if there's drift, I would probably have to go to the ag inspector and ask how come there's so much drift, because we're not allowed to.
Yeah.
Period. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Peter, go ahead.
I just want to express the issue from the point of view of somebody who's next door to a cannabis production activity who is an organic operator. So this is not the case you're referring to, where the farming operator might pollute a cannabis crop. It's the other way around. So
Wait, come again? Repeat that. It's in public comment.
if I'm an organic operation next to your operation, cannabis operation, this is not referred to in the conversation today, and it doesn't relate to the ordinance the way it's currently written. So I'm organic, right? I'm living next to you, right? So I want to invoke the terminology indivisibility and non-excludability, right? So whatever you're doing that might affect me is what I would describe as indivisible and not excludable. I'm not in the cannabis business. I'm in the organic beef production business. Hoop houses, schmoop houses, I don't care what they are, right? Any houses. Are you solving the problem or are you not solving the problem? Cannabis uses chemicals. Now, for those of you who think, well, there are organic cannabis operations in Lake County, there are 4. Out of all the permits that have been issued, there are 4. Most are not organic. You get into all this conversation about parts per million, fine. But you use pesticides and you use herbicides. You do. And and I'm sitting in an organic operation over the fence line from you, then I cannot be assured you won't compromise my organic operation. So this is the beginning of a bigger conversation. And I think one that we need to have. As I said earlier, I could go on. I've got issues with water. I've got issues with odor control. I've got issues with all kinds of things that are going on with cannabis that interfere with my operation. And what I'm trying to say is no one in the county deserves to be overtaken by this issue of indivisibility and non-excludability. You have a right to do your business. I have a right to do my business until your business affects my business or my business affects your business. Then we got to have a talk. And you say, all right, what about civil litigation? There very, very well be considerable civil litigation out of this in Lake County because I see the potential for it. But it should be avoided by the kind of conversation that would take place here. Every effort by this community and the people here should be directed to trying to avoid that kind of costly interaction. That's a very difficult path to go down. I think there are major issues with the cannabis industry that invite civil litigation today. But what I want to make clear on the hoop house issue is it could be a hoop house, it could be a greenhouse. Does it solve the problem? And does it coexist with me as an organic operation? This is the opposite case, not the grape grower who's polluting the cannabis operation, the cannabis operation that's polluting the organic beef operation.
I just
That's
need
the
you to
case I'm
restate
referring to.
what you said, because I misheard you.
Pardon me?
I just needed, she was asking for clarification.
Okay, I want to be very
If you
clear.
can wrap up your.
I also want to wrap up by saying I think we need to look at economics because as far as I can tell, and I've gone into this in depth, the cannabis industry is not economically viable in Lake County as it exists today. Doesn't work, and it's not producing results, economic value for the county. So let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you. And this public comment is specific to potentially allowing hoop houses. I just want to remind everyone of that. I know there's a lot to discuss, but if we could keep it focused on that topic.
I do have a public comment that has nothing to do with hoop houses. Is there going to be a general public comment time?
There is at the end, I believe it's the
thank
last
you.
item.
Thank
Sure, no problem. Do we have anyone else in the room that wanted to speak on the potential for hoop houses in FPC? All right, Ruby, we can go to the Zoom room, please.
Okay, looks like a Trey.
Hello. I just wanted to say that based on my experience with my clients allowing hoop houses in the farmland protection zones, they would embrace that wholeheartedly. That is something that would allow them to continue their cultivation without having to put down permanent structures using these temporary hoop houses that are allowed for up to 6 months. So I think they would be in great support of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gray.
Sarah?
Hi there, Sarah Bodner, consultant. I think if the task force would like to keep the farmland protection zone in place, then allowing hoop houses as an option would be a giant step forward. I don't think it answers the question, which has been asked a few times now in this meeting, which is, what is the problem? I think there has been a perception of a problem of having cannabis coexist next to other forms of agriculture, but those have been disproven, and not just anecdotally, scientifically, and in courts of law throughout California. We have seen regions like the county of Santa Barbara go through painstaking lawsuits over this, and it was found that cannabis grows, which all are held to higher standards than the food we eat in terms of what can be found in your product, are not negatively impacting neighboring forms of agriculture. The Sonoma State University conducted a study, vineyards next to cannabis grows, disproved the same. And so I think if we're looking at hoop houses to solve something, what is that thing? You know, this question has been asked a few times now. What are we trying to solve for? Cannabis is not contaminated. And also property rights. This is America. And so what we do on our land, no neighbor can control any other crop that their neighbor might grow. You can't dictate whether someone is going to graze their cattle organically or not organically. You can't dictate how they're going to treat their grapes, how they're going to grow their pears. So, you know, I think I want to come back to this question, because if we're talking about hoop houses as a solution, it's a step in a better direction than forcing people into greenhouses, but I'm still not sure it's actually solving something. Thank you.
Angela?
Thank you. So first, I don't know if allowing hoop houses instead of greenhouse is going to solve this problem. As has been pointed out, what is the problem that we're really trying to solve here? There are a lot of people that are in this task force that were at the ordinance through 3101 and 3103 hearings that participate in it. And the points that they brought up at the Board of Supervisors was it was to protect farmland that produces food. We live in a county that is a food desert. We are rural. If we get cut off from outside sources, we need to have food production here in the county. That is what they were protecting. Anyone can go back and watch the meetings and listen to what they had to say, but Supervisor Sabatier was very specific in what the desires were for creating the FPZ and how they came to this. So those were some of the main reasons why this was created in the first place. Thank you.
Andrew?
Hi, thanks. I just would like to once again echo the comments Sarah gave. I think if we're going to retain this LOD FPZ, then certainly hoop houses would be a step in the right direction, allowing hoop houses rather than requiring greenhouses. I think that's not the ideal solution, and I still think we're kind of searching for what the problem is here that we need to ban these altogether. If we're worried about cross-contamination, that can be addressed by a setback. If it's spray drift, that's addressed by all of the spray regulations that are already enforced by the ag department. I think every farm that exists has potential for contamination from their neighbors, regardless of whether their neighbor grows cannabis or something else. And we don't regulate all of that by a land use policy. We allow private business owners to sort that out themselves. So I would like to see this FPZ removed entirely, but if we're going to keep it, I do think the hoop house is, a step in the right direction. It's not ultimately, I think, ideal, but we're here to compromise, and I think that's at least a step towards a compromise.
Back for deliberation by the task force. Michelle stepped out for just a second. The topic for the task force is making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that hoop houses in place of greenhouses would be acceptable in the FPZ, if I understand correctly.
I don't know that we're necessarily considering making a recommendation specifically on that. I was just curious what the public input regarding that would be.
You feel that you got that answered?
To the best of my ability, yes.
With the task force then for further deliberation on the overall question, which is keeping, what is the overall question? Keeping the Lake County, the farmland?
Yes, if they would like to modify that exclusion zone language, the statement, and then the vegetation screening. Add it, remove it, amend it. Leave it.
So Maria, maybe you can provide a little bit of clarification. It was mentioned earlier, I think by Mary, just regarding the interpretation of the maps. When this says the following rules will apply when cannabis cultivation interfaces with farmland protection zones. That is referring only to this Lake County Farmland Protection Zone map, correct?
That's my understanding. Yeah. They adopted that specific map.
Yeah. Although there are multiple different farmland protection zones that are not included in this boundary within Lake County.
I would not understand where those would be located if they're not on that map.
Well, it's not, I think it's the statewide map.
Right.
That map wasn't adopted. That map of identifying the areas wasn't adopted as the FPZ.
The statewide map of farmland importance. No, this is farmland important. These lobby things right there.
Right.
That's
And
it.
let the board approve that this is basically their protection zone.
Yes.
I just think the concern has been raised that if somebody is farming outside of this area on what's currently mapped as historic and important farmland, you know, why would that person not receive these same protections when somebody inside these objectively drawn boundaries would receive those protections?
So that would translate then to a recommendation of an amendment of the map itself.
Correct. In addition to, or not in addition to, potential amendments to the language of the section.
That would be before the task force for recommendation as well.
Right. I mean, that's the direction that I would like to go in or suggest that we go in. It's difficult for me to suggest what that motion would be because we haven't come to consensus on what these maps are. So, you know, I'm extremely hesitant to make a motion to amend the map to include what I perceive to be other maps if we're not on the same page.
Well, are you talking about the same categories they have listed here? If you looked at the statewide map for prime farmland is statewide important, PD farmland and farmland is global important. Are you talking about like expanding essentially the map to include those based on the statewide map? And not just what the arbitrary and how we map it.
Correct.
So keeping those same designations, but expanding the countywide.
Right. I mean, the fact is that there is other important farmland that was excluded from these boundaries by some process that didn't incorporate pre-existing farmland maps. And I think it would make more sense for those maps to be consistent with each other.
Is that a motion?
Not yet.
So the conservation, their website is back up.
I have a question for you, Maria, and that is, which would be more appropriate, to make a motion regarding amending the map and then work through A through whatever?
I think I'd rather
Or
work through A through whatever. Yeah,
and then-
because if we end up with a consensus that is acceptable to the task force, you may have a more desirable outcome for your second motion or for your map modification motion. So far, from what I've been just kind of listening in on, I'm not sensing a lot of consensus at this point.
I don't know that any consensus can be had without further knowledge of the implications of each of these maps.
Okay.
We want the map.
Project.
We want the map.
So would then the task force prefer to deal with the map question first? Because it's really up to you. I'm not.
I think to Jennifer's point, it's important to know which areas we're talking about with regard to A through.
So many of them.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right. So many acronyms.
Government.
Yeah.
Good. So that's okay. So there we see the, Fortune's Farm.
I'd like to request that we zoom out just a little bit because we're cutting off like a good chunk of the county. Thank you.
Pink is the built-up land. You can tell because you know those.
Yeah, clearly.
Is there a key that you can pop out for this or legend?
So far, the dark green
It's prime
is
farmland.
prime farmland.
Yeah.
And the army green color is farmland of statewide importance. And that, light tan yellowish color is farmland of local importance. I haven't identified the farmland yet.
It was only shot based on just the year. Yes.
If you click on it, oh yeah, I can find the key.
Okay. Sorry, no key available.
I'm just going to identify.
And the yellow is great.
Gotta be.
Great.
There's absolutely a legend or a key.
Let me see the tan.
No, that's not it.
Yeah,
We're just not seeing it on the. Do you see it, Rebecca?
You get car sick, you want to avoid your, avert your eyes for a minute.
Yeah,
while you're
right.
Messing around.
I'm trying to look on my phone. Let's see that.
Try that one. It's other years.
Well, you gotta have it in there somewhere.
Okay, so the bright green is unique farmland. Unique farmland. If you zoom in a little bit more, you can see the colors a little bit better.
Not cut anybody off. So North Shore area. And then go down to South County
Yeah,
as
they're not
well.
on the GIS for the county. They're on-
Do the colors have letters associated with them?
If you click on the colors, it brings up a menu, and then you can click on the menu that tells you what the designation.
Yeah, because the legend is by letter,
Okay.
not by name.
Excellent.
Well, I get the, if you.
Prime farmland, P, farmland of statewide importance, S, unique farmland, U, farmland of local importance, L, farmland of local potential, LP. Grazing land, G, urban and built up land, D, other land, X. Water, W.
I think that might be the wrong legends.
So dark green is prime farmland.
Yeah, that
The
makes
army
sense.
green is farmland of statewide importance.
Okay.
It's kind of almost like one shade lighter than army green, fluorescent looking green or whatever, is unique farmland. And then the lighter color than that, I'd say it's almost like a beigeish yellow. That is farmland of local importance. And then the tan is grazing land. Yes.
So grazing land would not be included?
No, grazing and other is not included.
Okay.
Would you guys want to go back to the Lake County map and kind of do a side-by-side comparison?
To see if we've been updated or what purpose?
Just to do a compare and contrast from 2016, what was put in place. And then also the other side-by-side, which was our MPC, various things.
Was to add some of this to the.
So again, oops, sorry. Again, this is the FPZ as determined by the Board of Supervisors.
We're not missing all that much, are we?
Well, I don't think we have anything in South County.
Yeah, South County, it looks like it expands it a bunch in South County.
Yeah.
Currently, there's nothing in South County.
We can go back to the other map.
And then up around sort of North Lakeport, there's a whole section. There's a bunch over on they're like oaks in the hillside there that would be included. And then some additional lower lake.
To me, this California important farmland map maps out several different types of farmland, right? And then our farmland protection zone determined for whatever reason that some of that farmland is not worth protecting. I don't know.
How often does this map get updated? Is it every 4 years? 2 years? I think it's supposed to be 2 years, but it's not. Because I was waiting around for the last update for like a year or two.
Yeah, I think 2020 is the last year.
And so then our map would change accordingly?
Well, I guess that would be something else to consider is you can go back and look at the historical maps to see how many change, have there been any drastic changes in Lake County as far as designated farmland areas? Right. If it's remained relatively consistent.
Right.
Then I don't know if that would be.
I think it just changes from one class to another, just if it has water, if it's been used or something like that.
So out of curiosity, let's click on 1984. No anything apparently? Question mark? We're loading.
Yeah,
Trying
looks like
really hard.
Cloverdale got
Yeah,
some-
oh,
got
I mean-
nothing in this one.
Cloverdale.
The farmland is slowly creeping in.
Scroll out and see just some around Cache Creek and then out of the county.
Do you think it's a possibility?
Potentially, let's take a look at 86 and see if we have anything there.
Yeah.
Interesting. Hopefully county sometime.
Is it maybe just not digitized?
Okay, keep going. Let's find the first county, Lake Forest or Lake County Trail.
No,
Yeah, there's one.
Yeah.
I don't see 9.
Feeling all disenfranchised right now.
Okay, so 2006 has some, so it's
Okay,
96.
96, we've got
Okay.
96.
You got 96?
Ah, and a legend appeared. Crazy.
That's true.
So tan is not included, correct? Just anything out from straight gray and tan are not included, but everything else is, right?
There's also a purplish color.
Well, technically grazing land is part of the.
Yeah, it just wasn't identified
Yeah.
in the original ordinance or what the board.
Rebecca, are you thinking that tan would be included and the only thing out is the gray or the?
I am not thinking.
Well, I mean, when you were thinking about changing the map, when you started this conversation.
Right now I'm thinking about looking at what the maps look like.
Do you want me to scroll
Okay.
down so you can see South County?
Please.
Yes, that'd be great.
Is that Morgan Valley? That green on the
This is
eastern
Morgan
side?
Valley here.
Well,
Thank you. That's the western, like, streak of green and yellow.
Here?
Okay,
the grapes on 175 showing up copy,
thank you.
I think.
Okay,
You know what I'm talking about?
so, I think that, the board probably wasn't concerned with Winoff.
I'm in 96.
The vineyards on 175 are like my favorite vineyards in the whole county. The ones that cascade down one side of the road and then keep going downhill. It's so gorgeous.
They've been documenting changes in agricultural land since 1984. Is the area of interest still South County, or do you guys want to go North County? And see
Well, I was just curious about South County because there's nothing mapped under our ordinance for South County. And there's considerable farming ranching that occurs down. So that's why I was asking in regards to South County. But it's also interesting to see the area that's not included on FPZ that would be included in the Oaks area and in the Spring Valley area as well. Well, not in 1996, but
should we go to most recent?
I think we should.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We were not crashing the site. I thought it was long.
Most people that are logged into the site.
Dang, what's going on with my county today? Bringing it back.
Is this the fully loaded map?
Is there an area you wanted me to scroll into?
No. So I don't know if everybody has a copy of the public comment that was submitted, but there's a map attached to this that includes an overlay of FPZ against the categories of prime farmland, unique farmland, farmland of local importance, and farmland of statewide importance, which to me is the best way to illustrate which areas that are currently not included in the boundaries of FPZ would be included if a person were to hypothetically move to expand the map to include those areas.
The legend says it has the use permit and applications in there, and I don't see that on the map, and that's something that I'm looking at. It's like how many of the
I think that's
current pipeline applications
partly due to like the color soup that's happening there.
And it's how zoomed out it is. And then, of course, all the little magenta lines are possibly the same color as the farmland of statewide importance. It's like magenta versus orchid.
We can pull up that map on the screen too.
Yeah. This may be something that we want to take public comment as well, specifically the change in the map. Although I don't know that anybody that is affected is on the call today, because I don't know that.
Yeah, Carl, like you had said, the farmland of statewide importance, that can be kind of difficult to see due to the way the lines are mapped.
Task force wanted to reopen public comment. I think Nara suggested.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anybody.
I'm all about hearing from the public.
Okay.
there anyone in the room then for public input on this particular topic?
Expanding the FPZ map. Or not expanding.
Okay. Go to the Zoom.
I don't see any hands.
Peter has his hand up. Go ahead, Peter.
Just reiterating my point earlier, I have prime farmland in dark green in South County. And I'm organic. So what started this whole thing for me was, why are we prejudicially treating that land differently in the South County than it's being treated up by this area that has these, I guess, are they black circles, that black line, the black line around them? It doesn't seem to be a reasonable way to approach it. You should treat everybody equitably. So that's all I'm asking for. Is to
Right, so you would support the inclusion of all of it. Okay.
Yeah, I think we need, you can't have it both ways. We need to be equitable and fair to everybody. That's what I know.
Thank you. Go ahead, Trey.
Hi, Trey Sherrill. I'm sorry, it's not clear to me how the farmland protection zones are proposed to be expanded. I'm sorry.
My understanding is the black lines would they'd be removed, and we would refer to then the 4 categories on the bottom part of that legend. Is that what we're talking about?
That's my understanding.
Yes. Yes. Okay. It would no longer be limited to just the areas within that black border.
Okay, then in that case, I just want to bring it to your attention that I'm aware of many existing farms that are permitted and licensed on unique farmland, some on prime farmland, but mostly unique farmland and farmland of local importance. I think if you look at it, you will find a substantial number of the already permitted and pending applications are on those farmland categories.
The zoning ordinance currently has a legal nonconforming article in it that protects the entitlement secured prior to changes in zoning and general plan land use amendments. So those entitlements or that legal nonconforming status would apply to all approved permits.
We also added that subsection K last time.
Yeah.
About if the setbacks are changed.
I did speak to county council about that. That subsection doesn't need to be there just because we already have it in our other ordinance.
And this wouldn't apply to any project that's currently in the pipeline because this ordinance has to be adopted and go through a full ELR before it becomes law. Is that right?
If it's sorry, you gotta go. It would apply to, well, it depends on the date of effectiveness for this. Projects that have not been approved yet, it might apply to those. It would not apply to approved projects. Technically, you don't have the entitlement until you
until you have your use permit. But can you talk about what the timeline looks like though for this ordinance and its approval?
I'm anticipating now that we'll so after we're done with the meetings of the task force that we're gathering this input and recommendations, that's when we're going to start drafting the actual ordinance. That's going to take some time because it touches on a number of different articles. It's also going to take significant review from county council to make sure that it's consistent and compliant and in good form. So I'm expecting that we'll end our task force meetings for temporarily, probably early next year, and then start the drafting. And I would give that a good 6 months. And then we'll have an actual draft ordinance that then will come back to LAPAC. It will then also go to the Ag Advisory Committee and then in notice public hearings to the Planning Commission and the board. So this is probably a 2025 project.
Yeah. Maria, when you said it would come back to LAPAC, did you mean to say?
Oh gosh.
Yeah. LAPAC.
Yeah, sorry.
We're meeting.
Yeah.
LAPAC season.
See, LAPAC season, I'm saying it enough that it's resonating in the community though. Yes, so it would come back to the task force, just to make sure that we got it right, according to the recommendations, and then move on to the whole approval process.
And then where are we with the environmental, the EIR and the ordinance becoming effective?
We're fairly certain, and we would confirm this with the county council, but given that this is a policy change and that we would still require CEQA for every project, we're pretty sure we can do something with this. So we will not have the initial study or the EIR just based on policy updates still usually.
One more question for staff that's more specific, which is it wasn't here when 3101, or I just moved here when 3101 was adopted. But what was the county's rationale around the creation of the FPZ versus these other designations? Was the FPZ cannabis specific protection zone, or was it a different classification?
First, I would just refer you to those videos because that's what we're doing. We weren't there either.
All right.
So, but the part that we have managed to gather, they watched a number of the videos?
Yes, I did not watch that one yet, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
Looking at our folks in the room too. Do you guys,
The genesis of it?
Yeah, where FPZ came from, is that a cannabis specific designation, FPZ?
Oh, it is cannabis specific.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's
before this,
subjective
yeah,
at
we have not regulated ag outside of maybe grading permits. That's all handled through the ag commissioner. So, but it like having a vineyard doesn't require a use permit.
Right.
It's not until you get a winery that we step in and get involved.
You could grow grapes right up to the edge and spray them with whatever you want. You just can't grow cannabis.
Well, not with whatever you want. That would be
with
like a completely
whatever is
statement,
legal at the state.
but yeah,
Whatever's legal at the
with whatever you want and with whatever's legal at this time are two very different things.
Cannabis is the only agricultural product that planning has to process.
Want to keep saying that out?
So we do have a zoning permit for hemp, but
yes,
minimal, and that's not really discretionary.
And we haven't processed any of those for a while.
But it was going to save the economy. Oh, no. Millions of dollars. Billions. Billions.
Oh, it looks like we have.
I think we need a break. Can we get a break?
We are public. Yeah. I need to go down to the Middletown LAPAC meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
We want to take the comment from Holly and then take a break?
Yes.
Sure.
Go ahead, Holly.
Well, hi, Holly Harris. Basically, you've taken the map down, but, we have a lot of area over in Clear Lake Oaks and Long Valley, New Long Valley, et cetera, but I could not see what that was designated. Can you tell?
Which part, Holly? I didn't hear.
We have a large area in High Valley, New Long Valley, Old Long Valley, et cetera. I cannot see on this map. Could you tell me what that designation is?
Looks like there's some yellow, farmland of local importance, a little bit of orange, unique farmland.
Looks like there's some
scatterings of green in there too.
Do we want to take a look at that area on a different map where we have the opportunity to zoom in and be able to see streets?
Well, I basically just wanted to know if it was one of the 4 categories, because we certainly would support that being included, in this.
With that looks like farmland of local importance.
Which is a large swath for, our area, and we would like to see that included.
And then farmland of statewide importance and some other.
Okay. Thank you, Holly. All right. we want to do 5-10 minutes? What do you guys think? We have, about 1 more hour.
More like 10.
Let's do 10.
10 minutes. Let's say 5. What? Let's say 5.
And we'll
Oh,
be back in 10.
10. Yeah.
10-minute break?
10 minutes.
When we're all back, we'll start again. Yeah, how's that sound?
Yeah, well, we need to let the public know on Zoom especially, so we were planning to be back at 3:02.
All the wells you have. Everything is wiped out. 10 square miles.
It looks like, we have everybody, so we'll go ahead and reconvene the meeting, 3:07. I think where we left off, we just finished public comment, for the item about expanding the FPZ and looking at the maps, so bringing it back to the task force for discussion and a potential motion.
I'd like to make a motion to include all prime farmland, unique farmland, farmland of local importance, and farmland of statewide importance, not currently illustrated on the Lake County Farmland Protection Zone map, that farmland be included in an updated FPZ map.
So you want to call it all FPZ?
Well, I want to update the map. We can call it something else if we'd like to. Lake County Protected Farmland or Lake County Farmland.
So to include those areas as identified on the
Correct.
statewide map.
Yeah. That's my motion.
Any further explanation? One more time?
I would like to include prime farmland, unique farmland, farmland of local importance, and farmland of statewide importance as illustrated on the California Conservation map into the boundaries discussed in the Lake County Important Farmland section of the ordinance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so adding all of those areas that aren't currently included in the county's FPZ, including them in the FPZ. And that 1,000-foot setback.
And all of the,
and
these
the
A
green
through whatever.
So that was my
greenhouse
next question.
Yeah.
This would be in permanent structure, commercial cannabis in permanent structures for mixed light and indoor.
We haven't discussed any of those, so
Okay.
The motion is just to
the
expand.
motion is to amend the map. That is all that the motion is. To align the map with the pre-existing map for consistency.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second.
You should ask for discussion first. Once there's a motion made and then it's seconded, you ask if there's any discussion. If there's no discussion, then you can ask for the motion to be approved.
Okay, is there any discussion?
I obviously can't support this, what I was talking about.
Yeah, I need facts and figures and acreage that increases it, and yeah. I think we need facts before we can combine that.
Number of affected projects.
Okay.
Opportunity for those with affected projects to be able to comment.
Is that just out of curiosity language that can be incorporated into the motion and have the motion still be tenable, or is that something like?
No, I'm not going to make a motion on something I don't have base data on, or vote on anything that's not fact-based.
Well, the projects that are already existing, would they not be grandfathered in?
I guess we talked about that, a little bit. Yeah, they would be that are currently permitted. For those that are in process, it would depend on what the board decides is that cutoff, essentially, of when it's effective.
I guess my concern is those lands could be within a larger boundary that's already on the map, or it could be expanding the boundary that's on the map. And so I would need data numbers and visual representation of that.
Okay. Did we have any further discussion, or did we just move to a vote then? Okay, so all in favor of Rebecca's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Three, all in favor, or, sorry, all opposed?
No.
No. So motion did not pass. 3 yeses and 2 noes.
Okay. So, I think it would be appropriate to ask that we could, I don't know if you need a motion for this. I don't think we should need a motion for this, but ask if staff could pretty please put together a map that would reflect all of those areas on one map with a layer of permitted projects. If you'd like to have projects in the pipeline, I understand that. I honestly don't think that it's relevant because whoever's currently permitted, they're going to be allowed to continue operating the way that they are. And if you're in the pipeline, you're either going to be afforded those same protections depending on the activation date that this goes into effect, or you're not. So
they'd be more affected, I think, than people who have permitting already, right? Because the folks that have permitting already would be grandfathered.
Right. I just don't think it's our job to protect people who aren't permitted yet. I mean, I'm not like making policy for people who aren't through a process.
Invested in the county because based on existing land use and who have bought or leased and spent the money on hiring experts should be able to, I think, should weigh in if their project's going to be affected.
And the board of supervisors should decide what that activation date is and who it applies to, but that's not for us to decide.
Okay, staff is amendable to trying to get together a map, if that's what the task force would like. It won't be by Monday's meeting. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
It might take a little bit of time. I'd hope to have it by the following meeting.
We would need to coordinate with IT
with our GIS folks.
I mean, I think there is compromise to be achieved with regard to this topic. I don't think that's possible without that map and really seeing where we're at. And I think, again, I hate to say this, but we really need more of our task force here as well. So if we have to table, I don't want to table it. I'd like to get it done, right? Because we're going to spend another however many meetings discussing this for 3 hours, the same way that it's been discussed today. But if we have to table it and that's what's necessary for us to have a productive conversation, I understand.
That would be, and it would be tabled to not Monday, but are we meeting on the 25th or not? That's Thanksgiving week.
We have a meeting scheduled that day. Yes. Yeah. As long as we have quorum. And that is, I think it's going to depend on if we can get the map together by then, by the, Friday beforehand for posting. So we can strive for that. And then if not,
I mean, we may have a very low quorum that day too, or just barely a quorum. So I wonder if it's better to push that until the date's certain on December 2nd. So we're likely to have more of our task force members here.
Have task force members indicated that they won't be here that day?
I'm supposed to be out of town. If I have to drive in for it, I will. I'm looking, Thanksgiving, most kids are off. I don't know if people are going out of town. I imagine we may have a day like today.
We don't currently have a meeting scheduled that week, right?
No, we do currently.
We do.
None of the new ones have showed up on the calendar.
Ruby, can you confirm we have a meeting scheduled?
They have until that one.
Yeah, it's on the website. It's on the That's right.
Okay, well, should we leave it at staff will follow up with trying to put together that map for a future discussion?
Yes. I wonder whether you're amenable to discussing if we should just leave all of this for that, or if we want to talk about who houses and get some action on that.
I think I'd rather talk about everything with the map in front of me.
Agree. Right. Okay, so we are tabling the farmland discussion. Staff will bring back a map and some information. All right. Thank you for everybody's input on that one. Really helpful. Okay. So next, we are getting into our other focus topics that we all identified with that 1 or 2 meetings ago. The first one being incomplete, abandoned applications and voluntary withdrawal.
Yeah, okay. So with that, this was the topic that we had left off with last week. And there was requested language to be added. That way you guys could take a look at it, put some eyes on it and see if that was what you were interested in. So that language has been added. If you guys want to take a moment to look at that and then open it for discussion or any questions for staff.
Do you have the added language highlighted or not?
It's on page 22 at the bottom half, and it's all of that language that is added.
Everything after abandoned application.
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. We did discuss that a little bit, and I think Rebecca asked to see the language from the state. Okay. That's what we've added here.
Confused on the second sentence here. Applications will only be considered complete if all of the information required under the Lake County zoning ordinance is included. Are we missing and is included?
Yeah, it looked like that was missing.
Okay. So something like an is included or something like that. Or what would you recommend?
Is submitted.
Is submitted. Okay. Yeah.
How do we, community development department shall issue a written notice to the applicant by mail, email, or through the department's permitting system, informing them that the application is incomplete and identifying. I'd like to request an and or by 2 methods because I just think it would be safer to cover more than one base.
Sure. So with that, we're in the process of switching our permitting systems, and it's going to send automatic emails to the applicant at whatever stage they're at for our review. So that's one way that they would receive it. We could additionally send by mail, or we could do a traditional email straight from the applicant to the applicant from the assigned planner.
Okay. What's the summary going to?
Open Gov. Really next year.
On item A, an applicant shall submit all required information within 180 days. How strict are you? I mean, if the applicant is working with the county on
the project open.
Okay. All right.
We discussed that a little bit the last hearing as well. Sometimes things like hydrologist studies take a significant amount of time. We had backlogs where there was like 8 months for a waiting list for them. But as long as there's that transparency and communications, and we've added that communication to the record, they didn't fail to respond.
If the applicant fails to submit all required information within 180 days or demonstrate active
substantial progress.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all required information or demonstrate substantial project progress. Okay.
Only 1 fee.
And see.
C is listed twice. Please, like the same language is included under B as it is under D.
I agree, that you can read that.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Do we do it twice? Does any of that need to be talk about with or without prejudice?
That's a good point.
I would hope it would be without prejudice. But since you're not refunding the fee, you've been compensated for the time.
Right.
Seems like without prejudice would be.
Yeah.
So an applicant may reapply at any time without prejudice?
And have probably been an application without prejudice, maybe after application.
Okay.
Want to go one by one?
Make a motion.
Motions?
Or
One of those motions for consideration is after number 2.
Sure, we can go ahead and open public comment. We're at the bottom of page 22 on the agenda packet.
On your outline, you have items 1 and 2 and then motions. So do you want to do one by one with comment and discussion and public comment and then motion, or do you want to do 1 and 2 and then do that?
That's a good question. I think we should have 2 separate ones, one for incomplete and abandoned, and then one for voluntary.
we do that based on the.
Pretty separate. I don't see why not, but that's, I'll also ask the task force if they're amendable to that.
Yeah, it's listed as a topic for consideration on the agenda, so. Fine.
Okay, so opening public comment for the incomplete abandoned applications portion under number 1. Anybody in the room like to speak on this item? None in the room for now. Ruby, can we go to Zoom, please?
Angela, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know if this was asked, you guys talked about it, but C and D is this exact same wording. So was D supposed to be something different, or just did it get pasted twice?
And I don't know if you heard that. It looks like it got pasted twice.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't hear that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Angela.
Next slide, Jordan.
Yes, Jordan Poole, landowner. Just bear with me because I'm kind of new to the way that these things work. But you just did a motion to expand exclusion zones. You just voted on a motion to expand exclusion zones to farmlands, and it didn't pass. And then you pushed it to another meeting. And I'm just wondering if you could shed some light on how that works. If something doesn't pass, is it common just to push it down the road, or how does that work?
I can speak to that. That's a great question. So when a motion doesn't pass, there's often discussion. Sometimes there'll be an amended motion, a new motion, or there's always the opportunity to table an item, particularly when there's a request for more information. So in this instance, the task force asked that staff prepare a map and a visual and some additional information so that they can make an informed decision. So that one has been pushed and we've moved on to the current item.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
No problem. Anybody else on incomplete and abandoned applications? If not, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the task force for discussion or motion. Yes, please.
First amendment was the first sentence, and we just submitted, and then right after the 20 then. Second is under A, the applicant fails to submit all required information or demonstrate substantial progress within 180 days. The third is an applicant may reapply at any time following an abandoned application without prejudice. And the fourth is to delete the duplicate.
Yeah, strike the, yes.
Okay.
That's the motion.
So we have a motion from Nara with those items noted. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there discussion? Can move to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes. All right, we still have 32 minutes. Yeah, so for the next one, we're getting into voluntary withdrawal of current permits. Did you want to give the background?
Sure. So with that, we discussed this last meeting as well. The Lake County zoning ordinance currently does not allow a process for commercial cannabis cultivators or retail sales processors, distributors to decide to close their businesses. With that, they either have to expire after 2 years of inactivity or expire at the original expiration date after the 10-year life of the use permit. With that, staff is bringing forward a recommendation to allow a formal withdrawal process. We also had a request for language, so that's been added. We would take a moment to look at that and see if there are any adjustments that need to be changed to that. We can send it over to the task force.
Were we going to also talk about not a withdrawal, but I want to say stay in execution, but a what? Yeah,
Following?
Yes, a temporary.
Following and opt out is also on here.
They're later on the agenda.
Should they be moved from a formatting standpoint to like topics, similar topics?
The task force can always move an item on the agenda if they wish.
It seems to
14.
So 13 and 14 on page 26 seem like they would align within this particular area.
I sent some information from the BCC to Maria on this. On the reduction of canopy area. And send that to both.
That would be great. Thank you. Oh, maybe I did see that. If you resend it, that would be really helpful.
It's on the definition of canopy, but that one's also a different
interesting
topic.
Yeah,
for later discussion.
So at this time, did we want to continue a voluntary withdrawal, or is there appetite to take up one of those other items first? Or?
I would like to do that number. Personally, my preference would be to talk about item number 2 and then move from 2 to 13 and 14, just because they're all similar.
Okay. Is that amenable to the task force? I'm not sure if we need a motion, honestly, but if we have consensus. Yeah. Okay, so 2, and then we will take up 13 and 14, which is opt out and following. And that will also continue over if we don't finish those items today, just for anybody procedurally speaking. All right.
I don't think that I have any, I have no concerns with number 2. Yeah. Possible discussion.
Looks like Commissioner has her hand raised if we want to go to public comment.
I think I would like one more thing added, some sort of language that includes a copy of documentation submitted to the state for the cancellation of a state license as well. It might be really easy to withdraw from the county and not withdraw from the state.
Okay. Right, and so would you like that under item B as one of the listed items that they must provide to the department?
I think so, yes.
And documentation of state BCC
notifications. Yeah, notification, yes.
Well, not DCC, a state licensing agency.
Which is DCC.
Yeah. Last time we put an agency in.
True.
Yeah,
they yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, that may actually change this discussion about merging company.
Right. Okay. And proof of state licensing agency notification?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, do we want to open this item for public comment? I guess that's not a question. I will open this item for public comment for voluntary withdrawal. We're on page 23, item 2. Anybody in the room? Oh, Peter?
Yeah, is there another part of the ordinance that deals with what happens to a site when someone withdraws? So do they clean up? Do they haul their junk to the dumps? What happens?
So there is within the conditions of approval for approved projects that the site must be reclaimed to its original state within 6 months.
Could you recite or cross-reference that here, please?
So we actually have site reclamation bond as a line item that's coming up on the agenda as well. That would cover that.
Is that where it belongs?
We can take a look at that.
Maybe just be cross-referenced then.
Sure.
But I don't know that the bond necessarily makes clear that they cross-reference to the section that you cited. The permit, perhaps. If it's not in the ordinance, it's in the permit, right? Well, this is the ordinance and that's the permit. So let's focus on the ordinance for a moment to make sure it's in the ordinance. What we see in different places in Lake County is that whether folks have figured out the withdrawal process or not, some people have just left.
Right.
Everything's sitting in the field in a big mess.
Okay.
And I think that a lot of people feel, a lot of the public feel that we've talked to feel that is an eyesore. They don't like seeing it. It's an abandoned farm. It looks terrible. It detracts from the quality of life and the quality of environment that we all appreciate. So I'd like to see it cross-referenced here very clearly so that there's no doubt you have a responsibility to do it. It's in your permit. You have a bond. You have to do it.
Thank you. And on that point, I'm sorry, it's public comment.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to say, I wrote that down and the task force can consider that. I think it's a good point for cleanup. Do we want to go to the Zoom room? Looks like Angela has her hand up.
I guess question for you, Michelle and Mary. Do you have instances where there's multiple people listed on a permit as the permit holder, like co-applicants or co-permittees?
We have instances where corporations or LLCs are listed and they provide a list of managing members to the department.
Okay, so one thing to maybe consider is that the letter, the notarized documentation, include all of the permittee signatures be notarized on there, so that one person listed on that permit couldn't withdraw it without the other knowing. Something. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that hasn't spoken for this item, public comment?
Who holds who has the right to call on the performance bond? The county?
On the what?
They have a performance bond attached to their application. Is that what you were saying?
No, not currently. We have a discussion item
It's on the agenda. Okay.
on the agenda for later.
I'll talk about performance bonds at that time. Thank you very much.
Looks like Donna has her hand up.
Go ahead, Donna.
Very quickly, could you clarify? So the applicant has asked for reduced planting, and if it looks like or it's observed that he's not reduced, how does the public report that, and does it get followed up on? Thank you.
Yeah, that's one of our next items is opt-out and request for reduce. So we can go ahead and address that in our next item. I think would be more appropriate because it's specific to that process. Thanks, Donna. Okay, I don't see any more public comments on the voluntary withdrawal.
And it looks like Andrew has.
Go ahead, Andrew. Just kidding.
Hi, sorry for the last minute comment there. My hand wouldn't raise for a moment. Apologies. I just want to ask if there's anything on the flip side of this that we should be looking at. We've talked about what operators need to do to prove that they would want to withdraw. Is there anything we should be adding as far as language saying that conditions no longer apply upon withdrawal? Any ongoing monitoring is not required. I'm not sure exactly what that language would look like, but I'm just wondering if there's anything we need to add to clarify that all of the conditions of the permit would, cease to be enforced, and there would no longer be, compliance monitoring fees and annual tax liabilities due associated with that permit.
Thank you. All right, looks like that's it for, oh, we've got Jordan.
Hello. So I had a question. So is the current process for, voluntary withdrawal, just letting it expire? Has there been a problem with that process?
Yes.
Yeah, there is. Oh, okay.
Yes, there is the issue with that in that people want to no longer actively pursue their cannabis use permits and still have notifications from the department that they have fees due, that they have to schedule with us for a site visit, and they have performance reports due, which then is a violation of the project's conditions of approval because they're no longer participating in these activities.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, we'll close public comment on that item and bring it back to the staff force. It's getting late. The task force.
I think that is Henry's comment regarding the cessation of fees and taxes and things like that is important. I do wonder about a potential like closeout inspection or something like that to address any concerns might be raised by the public. I don't know whether that people are just leaving town.
Maybe it's an overall process added in language of some sort of site verification for reduction of canopy withdrawal following. Maybe there's another site inspection and a remediation site inspection to verify that those things have happened, which probably is going to incur a fee. But also I think the remediation guidelines should be spelled out pretty significantly because some things just really don't need to be taken down. They're not specific to cannabis. Raised beds, fencing. I think that we should be pretty specific on what we expect for remediation.
So the conditions of approval as they currently stand is the site is to be restored to its original condition prior to permit approval.
Do we think that that causes more environmental damage? It's a big deal.
I don't know if we can say, yeah, really speak on that.
Does anybody else have an opinion on what returning the site to could be?
I mean, if you're a lessee, then you should have to return the site to the state prior to activities, right? If you're leasing a property, that would and should be required of you in any lease that you're engaging in. So I think that makes sense. I mean, if a person bought a property and if you're asking, like, you know, they clean up all cannabis related materials, but leave raised garden beds or other fencing that isn't related to those related to the project, I think that makes sense as well. But I think those kind of have to be two different things.
I don't think it's owning the property or leasing the property is relevant to what the remediation requirements should be. Because
I may want the raised beds on there, you know, that the property improved.
okay, having been through this, there's a very specific list of requirements we had to do in Calaveras County when we remediated our farms there. And things like tearing up raised beds or irrigation systems weren't necessarily required because they had a secondary use that somebody could farm other crops. So I just want us to be really specific in this rather than returning it to its original state.
And so that sounds to me like a discussion for the site remediation topic.
Yeah. Okay.
Which will be direct people to site remediation.
Yeah.
In the formal withdrawal.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, so a blanket statement that states they have to adhere to all site remediation requirements. But we don't necessarily need to flesh out what those requirements are within this section of the ordinance.
Got it.
And then the fees to find taxes and et cetera.
I do think the closeout inspections and remediation inspections, that's very valid. And I would support adding language to that effect.
Seems also that it's like of value for all parties concerned, right?
Exactly.
No one wants to be held responsible for something they leave behind if they were allowed to. Public doesn't want things left behind that they don't want there.
That gives the county a cap on it.
Sure.
Sorry, we smell
Is that gas? Like exhaust or something?
exhaust or gas on this.
Let me turn it
Do that.
Yeah. You can't open the windows, right?
No. That's not.
Sounds like a heater. Yeah, since last.
Dust on it.
As I go over puffing into it. So is that
So adding outstanding fees to this is
Adding, yeah, or the cessation of fees and taxes or something. I think it was the suggestion that Andrew made about making sure that once the withdrawal happens, that the county doesn't seek further taxes or fees on their, maybe beyond the final inspection fee or something like that.
okay. And on the flip end of that, we want to make sure that all of the outstanding fees are paid prior to closure.
Correct.
Do we also want to put something in there because I forgot who that was, but they made a really good point. If one of the permit holders is like an LLC or something, you want all the parties listed.
All managing members, permittees or managing members to provide all of this information for each individual.
Or I think you just need written consent
from
each.
I believe we have a signing authority on file. So it should be in accordance with who's ever on the signing authority for the minutes.
Right.
Have you met my business partner? No. I just know people. Just kidding if you're watching. So do we want to wait and see that amended language or, yeah, okay, so, I think that I would like we need to make a motion on that. I'd like to wait and see amended language on. Okay,
Okay, so we're noting adding a subsection C to adhere to all site remediation requirements, written consent for all LLC members or whoever has the signing authority. And there was one more, the taxes.
All fees must be current. And they're still,
And then reference to site remediation language as well, right?
yeah, I think that was the first thing, so yeah.
Okay, so staff can draft that language.
We're at almost 10 till. Should we go to public comment?
Oh, yes, thank you for the reminder. Open public comment on this item.
Oh,
No, just general public comment.
Oh,
we already took public comment.
Did we just public comment on that?
Yeah.
That's what you've been waiting for the whole time, too. So thank you so patiently. All right. So we're going to conclude our list there. And we're going to move on to item 6, public comments.
Hi, yeah, my name's Jesse Clute. I live in the area of Lower Lake, kind of between Hidden Valley and Lower Lake. And my comment kind of goes to the kind of dovetails on what Peter was pointing out as far as the ordinance being inclusive to everybody that's in a similar situation. When the original ordinance was drafted, there was several areas that were set aside that were kind of residential, such as Hidden Valley, as an exclusion zone. There's been a lot of development in Lake County since then, and I would like to make, and some areas that probably should have been included in there, like the ranchos just outside of Hidden Valley. There's several subdivisions out Hartman Road that are not included, and I would just like to see maybe an agendized item to discuss that, because I think it's as big of a deal as the farm thing, because there's a lot of problems that come with putting cannabis right outside of a residential area. Primarily, you're going to run into a lot of public opposition. The We Grow project is a good example of that from 2020. It drug on for 2 years, went to the planning commission, back to the planning commission board, back to the board. It took 3 years. And it costs the staff a lot of money, or it's the county a lot of money, staff time. And I think if you had that, if that included exclusion that had been in place at that time, of course, we wouldn't have had that problem. The Double Eagle Ranch is another example of that, where it probably shouldn't belong. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of people that are going to disagree with that. But some of the things you're going to, and some of the things that I think people complain about, and I hear it all the time. I represent 2 of the subdivisions we're talking about, Daughter Ridge and Shadow Hills. Odor is going to be a huge problem, right? If you have 30 houses within 1,000 feet or even a quarter mile, but I'm sure the restriction would be 1,000 feet. Depending on which way the wind's blowing, you got 2 acres of weed, you're going to smell it 2 miles away if the wind's right. 1,000 feet would be a minimum separation, I think. And then the other problem with having it close, and I heard the argument that this is just another ag crop. Well, it's not. That's why there's so many regulations at the state level, at the county level. It's not just an ag crop. You don't see a robbery, armed robbery for pears, walnuts, things like that. There was a robbery on corner of Spruce Grove Road and Jerusalem Grade about 2 months ago. It was an armed robbery, which is close to our subdivision. One of the neighbors had come out to find out what was going on from the subdivision and was shot. So, he had nothing to do with the robbery, had nothing to do with the grow. If that had been an exclusionary area, that wouldn't have happened. So safety is utmost important. Of course, we could go into quality of life. If I bought a house in a neighborhood and I lived there for 20 years and a giant white hoop house went in 1,000 feet away from me, it would obviously affect my quality of life and everybody else in the neighborhood. So in closing, I'd just like to say I'd like some more discussion on this and like to see it as an agenda item so we can have more comments on it.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind of where to appropriately place that would be within the community growth boundaries. If those sections, I don't have them all memorized, but if those areas aren't within community growth boundaries currently, it dovetails into our local area plan updates and our general plan updates that are right now looking at those boundaries. Are you involved in any of those?
Peripherally.
Okay, because that's one of the items that's being looked at right now, and then you can't have cannabis within those community growth boundaries. So I'm just thinking that that might be the most appropriate because the community growth boundaries are listed as one of these exclusion areas as well. So,
but aren't there restrictions on who can be in a community growth area?
Community growth boundary?
Yeah.
We're in the process of updating them all right now.
Okay.
So, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a valid point that things have changed as far as development. So thank you for that comment. Okay, well, I think this was a really. Oh, sorry, Holly. Go ahead. And Angela.
Hi there. Excuse me. Holly Harris. Sorry, my throat's gone here. On the update that you gave to the Planning Commission yesterday, Table 2 said the remaining focus topics to be considered by CODIF, which are the few things that we have on this list here. But there were a number of other public requests for a discussion, and so I was wondering if those were also going to be discussed.
Yeah, I was going over that when I was making that table, and it seemed like most of them were included within the larger categories on the list. But the task force can correct me if I'm wrong and forgot any of those, because we ended up leaving off with the task force deciding on which items to pick up.
Excuse me, Michelle, but if I remember correctly, what Maria asked were, what are the easy pickings? And that list came about.
Okay. We'll go ahead and look at that list again, because we certainly want to include them, and I'll go back and watch that video and check with Maria to make sure that we're not leaving any off that should be included.
Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. All right, Angela.
Thank you, Michelle. Can I just request that you or Mary send out an email to what isn't going to be on the agenda Monday, but that you guys are adding on? Can you just, or have Ruby send us out an email and like the maps that you're describing that you're going to be bringing on Monday? Since are they going to be sent out to the email list before Monday?
Yeah, two things. The maps will be ready by Monday. We're hoping to have those for the next meeting on the 25th, I think it is. But what I did say in the beginning is that any changes, like if we're able to pull together draft minutes from today, for example, we'll be bringing those to the meeting and can email them out as green sheets, or if we have any other updates. At this point right now, the agenda looks exactly the same as today because we had to post it today. This morning, we actually did it the other day. And so we'll just be leaving off on the discussion items that we ended with today and starting with those on Monday. So that would be sort of the update, but I don't foresee us producing anything with the exception of maybe some of this draft language we talked about, but we'll certainly make sure we get that out to everybody.
Okay, so just to be clear, so right now, farmland protection zone is not going to be discussed on Monday. It's going to be the meeting after it, just for clarification.
Correct, or potentially even the one after that if we don't have
the maps
prepared.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Donna, go ahead.
Thank you. Real quick. If a project is grandfathered in prior to the ordinance and does violations, will they be held accountable? And does that permittee pay the county for all the violations? Example, like maybe he says he's has less square footage, but he has more, or he's harvesting at night with lights and noise and not proper people coming in doing the harvest. Grandfathered in projects will be treated the same for violations as everyone, correct?
Yes, if I'm understanding your question properly. We'll get into that discussion, it sounds like, at a couple of the next meetings, but they would still have to abide by all of the regulations. They wouldn't be able to just violate other standards, with the exception of if some of these setbacks change, of course, in the meantime, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Michelle, real quick, sorry to bother. I'm going to double dip here real quick. Can you just offer a little bit of clarification? So when you guys say grandfathered in, is it grandfathered in for the life of the permit, which is 10 years, and then it wouldn't be allowed? Or is it grandfathered in as long as it's the same applicant after that 10 year?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because typically permits follow the land, but cannabis use permits are 10 years. So that would have to be a discussion, policy decision for the board.
Okay, thank
you. Yeah. Yeah, that is a really good question. Thank you. This has all been good stuff. I appreciate everyone's time and opinions and input. We will adjourn the meeting at 3:58.